Hey guys, welcome back to Wrestle News 365. Hope everyone is doing very, very well. Having a good Wednesday. We have a ton of WWE and AEW and even a bit of New Japan news to get into today. So let's get straight into the stories and let's kick off with, quite frankly, what everyone is talking about, because yes, it's been revealed that Monday night's episode of Raw on the USA Network drew an all-time record low in total viewers and in the key demo. Yes, Monday's live WWE TLC Go Home edition of Monday Night Raw, featuring the final build to Sunday's event, drew an average of 1.527 million viewers on the USA Network. This is according to Showbuzz Daily, where everyone gets their ratings information from. Of course, it's 1.52 million live viewers, doesn't take into account DVR, on demand, etc. But this is down 12% from last week's 1.737 million viewers. For this week's show, the first hour drew 1.627 million viewers. Last week's first hour was 1.852 million. The second hour drew 1.512 million viewers. Last week's second hour was 1.775 million. And the final hour drew 1.441 million viewers. Last week's third hour drew 1.583 million. Monday Night Raw ranked number 31 in the night for viewership on cable, which is down from last week's number 20 spot. This week's Raw drew an all-time low in total viewership and a new all-time low in the viewership for each hour and a new all-time low for the key demographic. This week's Raw was down 26% from the same week in 2019. Furthermore, last week's episode of AEW Dynamite on TNT drew a 0.45 rating in the key 18 to 49 demographic, which beat every single hour of this week's Monday Night Raw in that same demo. So I know that it feels like most weeks at this point, every time the Raw ratings come in, every time the Raw viewership comes in, it feels like we have a new record low. Nevertheless, this is not any less shocking because of this news that Raw is an all-time low. I've been saying this for a long time at this point. I think when it comes to ratings, the discussion, are they important? They are still important. There is an importance factor to them. There absolutely is, right? Television networks, cable networks, there's an importance. They like to know how many people are tuning in live to their product. Advertisers, importantly as well, like to know how many people are tuning into the product that they want to advertise on. It is important. They are important. Are they as important and vital as they were in the 1990s or the early 2000s? No, they're not. When you have the discussion about ratings, and I say this all the time with AEW and NXT, and whenever we talk about ratings here on the channel, there has to be a discussion about how people consume content in 2020, right? Quite frankly, not a lot of people, 1.5 million live viewers, actually tune in live every single week to watch a show. When it comes to Monday Night Raw, you can watch everything that happened in that 3-hour period in about 6-7 minutes the following morning on YouTube. They post all of the clips, the important stuff, on social media. So if you want to catch up on the main points, the highlights of Raw, you can watch it on Twitter, on Facebook, or on YouTube, or wherever. It doesn't also take into account on-demand viewing, streaming, illegal streaming, all of that stuff. It doesn't take into account all of that stuff. So ratings, are they important as they were in the 1990s? Absolutely not. But there still is an importance to them. And the fact that it feels like every single week less and less viewers are tuning in, that is a problem for WWE. That is a problem for Monday Night Raw. Now, I know a lot of people will use the current pandemic as an excuse for Monday Night Raw's woes, and does that play into it? Slightly. But the counter-argument to that is SmackDown's doing fine for SmackDown, as it were. I'm sure Fox probably wants more than just 2 million viewers every week live. They probably want what happened for their debut when it was close to 4 million or 2.5 or 3 million. Fox would want that. Nevertheless, SmackDown is doing fine. It's not doing record lows every week, so why is Raw struggling so much? And this goes back to the issue with Monday Night Raw since 2012. Look, Monday Night Raw, since the Attitude Era in the 1990s and the late 90s, it's always been going down. The average viewership for Monday Night Raw goes down every single year. Now, there are a variety of factors that play into it. Like I said, the way people consume content is fundamentally different in 2020 than it was, say, in the late 90s. That just is the case, and it evolves and changes every single year. Nevertheless, once Raw went to 3 hours, it was a death sentence. It was the death knell in the red brand on Monday nights. Historically, this is the maddening part of it when it comes to Monday Night Raw in the 3-hour format. Historically, whenever a show in pro wrestling has gone to 3 hours, it dies. It dies a slow death. Look at Nitro. Nitro's ratings began to tank once they started going to 3 hours. So much so, I mean, and again, there are other factors in there, the creative, the stars leaving, whatever, the inmates running the asylum. But once they went to 3 hours, the show died. The show died, and it was a much quicker death than Monday Night Raw. Nevertheless, the show died. Why? Because as a fan, to tune in for 3 hours every single Monday, I mean, it is such a drag, and it is such a bore. Raw is bore. That is the issue of Monday Night Raw. It's 3 hours every single week. That is like watching, you know, I've spoken about it before, the Marvel films, right? The Marvel films, arguably, it's the most popular franchise in cinema right now. The Marvel films. And they can be from 2 hours to 3 hours in length. Imagine watching a Marvel film every single Monday for 3 hours. Even that, you'd be, after a couple of weeks, you'd be tired. You'd be going, man, give it a break. I want to watch something shorter. And even the people at Marvel, the geniuses at Marvel with all those stories that they have, they would run out of stories after a couple of weeks, going 3 hours every single week. I mean, it's insane. It's insanity. That's what it is. It's pure insanity. The fact that Raw's been able to sustain a 3 hour format for about 8 years at this point, over 8 years at this point, is quite a credit to WWE and the USA Network. But that show being 3 hours fundamentally will kill it. And I'm not saying that if you move it back to 2 hours, Raw will immediately skyrocket up the ratings, because there are other issues when it comes to creative, when it comes to the stars on the show, the segments, the scripted promos, overly produced segments, the bad writing, the bad booking, 50-50 booking. I mean, we could go on and on with the criticisms for WWE. But fundamentally, that show being 3 hours will kill it. And I don't like people using the pandemic and the virus as an excuse for Monday Night Raw's problems, because Raw has been going down in terms of average viewership, live average viewership, every year. I've said it before, the whole pandemic just sped up the process like 3 years. If things were completely normal right now, Raw would still be going down. It just would be at a slower pace. The pandemic has just caused people to, you know, money's tight, to cut the cord when it comes to cable. SmackDown's on network television, it's different. So when it comes to cable viewership, you know, people are going, you know what, I can't justify. Why would you justify spending any money watching Monday Night Raw? They don't give you any reason to watch it. There is a huge lack of storyline progression, and as I mentioned, you can watch everything that happened in those 3 hours in about 3 minutes the following night, or following day, or following morning on YouTube or wherever. And because that's the case, because it takes 3 minutes to recap what happened in Raw, it shows you that most of the time, most of that time period for the 3 hours on Monday nights is just filler. It's nothing going on. It's not must-see TV. So why should you tune in live? Because it's not must-see. There's no reason to watch Monday Night Raw. So, I mean, and we can complain about it being 3 hours. Lord knows I do. But it's not going to change anytime soon. It really isn't going to change anytime soon. Why? Because WWE gets paid very, very, very well to have that third hour on Monday nights on the USA Network by USA. Why? Because regardless of how bad the ratings are, especially in that third hour, they're better than anything else the USA Network would have on during that period of time. If USA Network didn't have Raw on during that period of time, they'd be worse than 1.4, 1.3, 1.5 million live viewers in that 10 p.m. to 11 p.m. slot. So USA is desperate to keep Raw at that time. The irony is that they paid WWE so handsomely for that third hour because it's better than anything else they would have on during that period of time. It cannibalizes the previous 2 hours. So it's such a paradox. Oh, we need to have that third hour because the ratings are actually good for the third hour for what we usually would have, but it kills the 2 previous hours and it kills the ratings on the network. Fundamentally as well, USA Network is a dying network as well. USA Network is not as strong a cable network as it was 10, 15 years ago. If you look at the cable rankings in terms of year on year, I'm not even sure if USA Network's in the top 5 anymore, or even the top 10. I think it's been lapsed by quite a few people at this point, quite a few cable networks. So there is a variety of issues there. When it comes to the 3 hour format, will that change anytime soon? You know, I don't think so. And like I said, you know, once you get past the 3 hour format, would Raw skyrocket anyway? I don't know. But it would certainly help. It would certainly help. But again, it's not surprising at this point. It's not surprising at this point because Raw is such a tough watch. And historically, I've mentioned this before on the channel, historically, as you get to the end of the year, as you get to December, it's a low point in terms of creative and in terms of ratings anyway. WWE is a tough watch in December and the holiday season. Nobody cares. They're busy doing other things and there is no reason to watch Raw or just WWE programming in December. Once you get into January, you start having the Royal Rumble, WrestleMania season, things pick up naturally. But it's always difficult to watch anyway. And then once you give a show like you gave us on Monday nights, there is no reason. There is no reason to watch it. There is no reason to watch it. Now, in terms of a reaction internally to these low ratings, according to WrestleVote, very reputable source on Twitter, the news of the record low numbers, quote, isn't sitting well with those in power to a point where they expect, quote, reactionary decisions to be made in the near future. This is what WrestleVote tweeted out yesterday. It said, quote, talking to a source just now who said the record low Raw rating news isn't sitting well with those in power to a point where they expect some reactionary decisions to be made. Time will tell. Now, I'm a big fan of WrestleVote. I think their credibility is, quite frankly, some of the highest out there when it comes to wrestling journalism, so I don't doubt that their source isn't accurate there. I just roll my eyes at it. How many times have we seen a bad rating when it comes to WWE? We're going to make changes, reactionary changes. Do you remember, what was it, a couple of years ago? I think it's nearly 2 years ago to the day, probably a little bit just over 2 years, when the McMahons came out on Monday Night Raw, right? We haven't been doing a good job. We haven't been doing a good job. We apologize, but now the power lies in you. You've got the power. You've got the power. You're the authority. How did that work out? It's an even lower rating than ever before. So what are they going to do? Wheel the McMahons out again and say suddenly they're the authority again? That's really going to work. Any reactionary decision they make isn't going to do nothing to the long-term ratings of Monday Night Raw. If they switched the WWE Championship on Sunday to Drew McIntyre, or they had The Miz cash in, or they had Brock Lesnar come back out, it wouldn't do anything to Monday Night Raw in the long term, because Monday Night Raw is a dying brand. There are fundamental issues with Monday Night Raw. The 3 hours, the way that it's written, the chaos backstage every Monday night. Those are the issues with Monday Night Raw. Any reactionary decisions, we're going to put the title on AJ Styles. That's going to do anything. That's going to do anything. And no disrespect to AJ Styles, but the issue is bigger than who's champion. The issue is way bigger. Even than creative, the issue is bigger than that. Raw's format is a massive problem. Then you can get into other issues, and they're just wider issues with WWE. So the idea we're going to make some reactionary decisions, it's not going to change a thing. It's not going to change a thing. Raw's issues are 8 years deep at this point. Raw's issues are far, far worse than any reactionary decisions. So, I mean, we'll have to wait and see what they do. I mean, maybe we will have a title change at TLC. Maybe we will have Vince McMahon come back out. But it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean anything, and it won't change anything. Raw is just... Raw is bore. That is the problem. Raw is bore. It is not must-see TV. It is such a difficult watch every single Monday, to the point that you can be an hour into Raw and you go, oh my gosh, we have 2 hours left of this. And the first hour alone has felt like 3, let alone the next 2. So Raw's issues are far deeper than that. And I expect them to get worse. I expect them to get worse. Even at the point of they'll go up around January. They'll go up around WrestleMania season. You can't tell me this time next year that the ratings won't be worse or they won't have gone down again. Because they will. They will. And it just, fundamentally, there are issues with Monday Night Raw and there are issues with WWE when it comes to Raw. That is nothing new. That is nothing new. Now, speaking of Raw, let's talk about some of the creative behind the scenes for Monday Night Raw. There were reportedly timing issues with Monday night's TLC Go Home episode of Raw on the USA Network, which obviously was clear with the way the show just randomly went off the air during the WWE Championship Ascension ceremony featuring AJ Styles and WWE Champion Drew McIntyre. PW Insider has added that WWE officials were said to be not happy with the timing issues. Now, regarding the script for Monday night's edition of Raw, the show that aired on TV was very much the show as it was originally written, but the specific placement of segments and where they were fitted to the show changed at times over the course of the day. There was also a lot of rewriting of the Raw dialogue as the day went on. This was described as a vision of WWE Chairman and CEO Vince McMahon, described by one source as the situation where the creative writers were, quote, giving him what he wants. One significant change made during Monday's afternoon was WWE nixing a planned singles match between Keith Lee and The Miz. This ended up being a 2-on-1 handicap match, which saw Miz and Morrison defeat Keith Lee by pinfall. Lee was also scheduled to lose to Miz before the singles match was changed. So, look, I mean, another day, there was changes for Monday Night Raw. It's par for the course at this point, like I said. And before people say, well, that probably caused a low rating, it didn't. Raw has so many problems. The Keith Lee situation, I don't know what to say anymore about the Keith Lee situation, quite frankly. Does Vince McMahon like him or not? I mean, who knows? Who knows? I mean, imagine working in that environment as well. You're walking on eggshells as it is when it comes to Vince McMahon. And then you have all of these changes. And I mentioned before, the idea and role of a writer on the creative team in WWE is arguably the most redundant position on earth. Because you can do your job writing Monday Night Raw for 6 days, and then that script is ripped up every single Monday, and it just gets to the point where you just go, well, what do you want? What do you want me to write down? And then you just transcribe what Vince McMahon wants. The idea of being a writer for Monday Night Raw, it's the most redundant, it really is the most redundant job in the world. So nothing new when it comes to the creative for Raw. Now, sticking with WWE and sticking with the creative team, WWE officials recently asked a group of creative team writers to make a list of underutilized wrestlers that they feel could shine if given the proper opportunities. While the list had a range of names on them, WrestleVotes, who referenced them earlier, reports that nearly all of the lists included 5 different superstars. Those superstars are Cesaro, Angel Garza, Chad Gable, Peyton Royce, and Carmella. Now, there's no word if WWE officials plan on doing anything with these lists or pushing any superstars that were mentioned on them, but it will be interesting to see how it plays out in the future. Now, when it comes to Cesaro, he's often referred to as one of the most underutilized WWE superstars forever at this point. Angel Garza has been featured in Raw vignettes with a mystery love interest while working on main event matches recently. I think that love interest is going to be Eva Marie. That's the rumor. Chad Gable is currently working in a SmackDown storyline with Otis as his coach and teacher. Peyton Royce, she's also on main event in a storyline with Lacey Evans as her partner because she split up with the Iconics for no reason earlier this year. Now, as far as Carmella, she's feuding with the SmackDown Women's Champion Sasha Banks and challenges her for the SmackDown Women's Championship at TLC on Sunday. When I saw this story, look, I think people might see this story and get their hopes up and go, oh, the writers want to push Chad Gable, the writers want to push Cesaro, and the writers, they like Angel Garza as well. Part of me thought, I mean, this is kind of a joke, but not really. Part of me thought that Vince McMahon got this list of these writers and goes, right, we'll fire them all. Because, I mean, it wouldn't surprise me. And it wouldn't surprise me if he gets this list of names that are underutilized because he knows that's what the fans like and the fans are behind these people, and then purposely, buries them. I hate the word bury, but then trashes them on TV or puts them in terrible gimmicks or whatever. And the reason I say that is because a story came out about Jericho, and he talked about Pat Patterson, and that Pat Patterson in creative meetings would always push. We've got to push Dolph Ziggler. To the point where Vince McMahon actually started not pushing Ziggler, put him in terrible storylines or having him lose as a rib on Pat Patterson. Now, I'm not saying that's the same situation here, but just because these writers say, these guys are underutilized, that doesn't mean Vince McMahon's going to do anything with them. If anything, it might pee him off that, these guys are underutilized while they can just sit on main event and do whatever. I mean, are they going to do anything anytime soon? Cesaro at this point, I mean, he made his debut on the main roster, 2012? I think that's 8 years ago. And Vince McMahon, everyone knows that Cesaro is a main event player, apart from Vince McMahon. Why? He's got something missing, pal. I don't know what that is. He mentioned before, well, he's Swiss. Like that means anything. So I saw this story and I just rolled my eyes because the amount of time we've heard stories like this. Oh, these guys are underutilized. But Vince McMahon doesn't care. He really doesn't care. And even if he did have plans for him, it'd probably change about 10 times on Monday Night Raw anyway. So I saw this story and sort of went, okay, sure, they're underutilized. It doesn't matter in the eyes of Vince McMahon. I agree with these writers, they're underutilized, but in the grand scheme of things, will it change anything? No. Just like Monday Night Raw. Now let's switch to AEW. Let's talk about Jim Ross, because Jim Ross has been a topic of discussion recently, because Jim Ross made some comments on his podcast talking about the evolution of the pro wrestling business and talking about AEW's overutilization of, is that a word? Overutilization? Whatever. Of high-flying spots, dives, tope suicidas, and near falls and kickouts, and just to the point when it gets over the top. Now, he spoke about the DDT and the super kick when it comes to that evolving and no longer being a finish. He said, no, that evolution of the business is BS, or that our business is evolving. How the F do you know that it's evolving? Not you, Conrad, but in general. They should be protected. Of course they should. Well, we don't sell right hands, but if you hit me with your left, it'll register. What? But if you hit me with your right, I'll sell it like a drunk man? Come on, that's so stupid. He said the DDT is a finish instead of a transition spot. Sure, Michael, same thing. Super kicks are just part of the flow of the match now. Nobody wins with it. So what does that say to you? Does that say back in the day, guys were more proficient at delivering a DDT or a super kick than they are in this generation where things are evolving and changing? I want some proof of this, SH. You can carry on the rest. I want someone to prove to me that the changing of wrestling is, the change in the wrestling business is what it is today, and that's making a difference. Maybe in some people's eyes, but is it making a difference? I say no. JR then criticised when wrestlers dive over the rope onto a group of wrestlers who are foes but standing side by side. He said that no one ever wins with that move and it's just done for the pop. He says they go, holy SHIT, this is awesome, it's a spot folks, it's a trapeze act, come on, I don't buy into that. The DDT is a great finish and it shouldn't be used as such unless you are not proficient as Jake the Snake was and you can't execute it. What if I said on commentary, boy folks, do you remember those DDTs when someone hit it and it was over? I guess these guys just aren't as good as they used to be. That ain't going to help anyone. But there's a thought there, and it's the same with the super kick. Now, JR then recorded about Vern Gagne and Lou Thez lasting 1 hour and the match centered on a headlock. I disagree with him there. I think in 2020, if you had a match that had a just was around a headlock, I think people would be slightly critical of the action there. Wrestling has evolved to that point. But this is where people are really starting to talk about it. So JR said, I told a kid the other day at AEW that everyone does the same effing spot. All you guys do is go outside, cluster up like coils, you stand there in a huddle, friends and foes together, side by side, so you can catch some leaping idiot going over the top who never wins with that move. They're looking for the holy you-know-what chant. They love to hear, this is awesome, it's a spot folks, it's a trapeze act, I don't buy into that, the DDT is a great finish and it should be used as such. Now, I don't disagree with JR. If anything, I definitely agree with most of his comments there. This is the thing that really got me angry. So AEW wrestler Brandon Cutler, who mostly appears on AEW Dark, he's going to be on Dynamite this week, he was hyping up the match he was going to be in, but he took a shot at JR. He said, quote, this Wednesday on AEW Dynamite 7v7, we're going to go to the outside, cluster up like coils, stand there in a huddle, friends and foes together side by side to catch some leaping idiot going over the top. Can't wait until 8 p.m. TNT, hopefully 1 million viewers, let's effing go. The nerve of this guy to criticize Jim Ross for valid criticism. Everyone said this at the start of AEW, and I think a lot of people have been proved right by this. That over-the-top, high-flying stuff is great. You know, the spots, I personally have said this before, I hate that spot as well. CM Punk made a tweet about it as well. The spot where we're brawling on the outside, but not really, because we're looking up like this, waiting for someone to jump off the top rope, and then when we do, we catch them, and we get the, oh, it's a great spot, this is awesome. What a terrible spot. What a terrible spot. It is. It lacks logic. It absolutely lacks logic. And maybe I am old school as well. Maybe there are people that are 10, 15 years old right now that love that spot because that's the wrestling they've grown up on. It wasn't the wrestling I grew up on. It's not the wrestling that I like. And it's, quite frankly, it's the wrestling that lacks logic. JR is absolutely right. One of my biggest problems with AEW, beside the lack of just logic when it comes to the booking of women's wrestling in AEW, is so many times in matches, there's a spot, it's a great spot, and you think this is it, and it's 1-2, and they kick out, and you just go, oh, the match should have ended there. And then it goes on for 5 more minutes, and we have 5 more. Near fall, near fall, near fall. I get it, I like a near fall, but when you have 5 in the space of 5 minutes, it doesn't mean anything anymore. It doesn't mean anything anymore. And these high-flying dives, they're great. They're great, but where's the logic? Where is the logic? There isn't. There isn't any logic a lot of the time. There is no logic when it comes to these kind of, I don't know, these dives, these jumps over the top ropes. They're just stupid. They are stupid a lot of the time, and I agree with JR. I don't like it. So the idea that a wrestler, someone from AEW, someone like Brandon Cutler, can criticize JR or mock JR for a completely valid criticism is just baffling to me, and I saw it, and I think a lot of people have reacted the same way as me, just going, what an idiot. Honestly, what an idiot. It's ridiculous to me. Let's move on though, go back to WWE, because we have some news about WWE possibly allowing fans at Tropicana Field for the 2021 Royal Rumble. Now, we're about a month away from the 2021 Royal Rumble pay-per-view. Now, there's no confirmation if WWE will bring back fans to Tropicana Field for the big event or not, but what could be a good sign for WWE bringing fans to the Rumble is that the NBA's Toronto Raptors announced today they will allow a limited number of fans at home games in Tampa's arena. The team is based in Toronto, but They're using the Amalie Arena for the 2020 to 2021 NBA season due to current restrictions in Canada. Now, the Raptors will make fewer than 3,200 seats available for preseason games, beginning with the game against the Miami Heat on December 18. After the preseason games, up to 3,800 fans will be available to attend regular season games. Now, there'll be no floor seats that will be sold to fans and no seats that will be available within 30 feet of the court, but it has been reported that WWE does have a main goal of using real live fans in the crowd at the 2021 Royal Rumble. If that happens, it'll be interesting to see how they bring fans into the crowd with having the WWE Thunderdome set up at Tropicana Field. Now, of course, WWE have been allowed to have fans at recent events ever since the Florida governor, Ron DeSantis, dropped restrictions back in September, some that allow all Florida stadiums to go to full capacity, which is insane, by the way. WWE hasn't gone to that route yet. But what is interesting, of course, is that we've seen NXT essentially do a similar thing when it comes to the Capitol Wrestling Center. You have the hybrid of real fans in attendance plus the virtual fans in attendance. I would think probably at this point we do get fans back for the Royal Rumble in January. My only thing I would probably say when it comes to that is, look, it's not getting any better anytime soon when it comes to this whole pandemic and the climate at the moment with everything that's going on. It's not getting better. And as we go into winter, it is getting worse and numbers are going up, and especially with the holiday season. Over here in the UK, we've got this huge uproar at the moment, but whereby there was a 5-day window where families were allowed to mix around the Christmas holiday period, and now some people are saying they should reduce that because lives will be in danger because of it. And look, it's an issue. It's a massive issue, and just because we have a vaccine, it hasn't stopped. It hasn't stopped, and it's not going away anytime soon. We have to look to the spring and the summer next year as to when it can possibly get better. But knowing WWE and knowing how they would like to go about this, I would probably think that they're looking to get fans back in January. We'll have to wait and see. I'm sure they'll probably make an announcement about it soon. Let's stick with WWE and talk about Monday Night Raw once again, because WWE is looking to continue the Ricochet versus Retribution feud for the next few weeks at least. WWE reportedly has plans for the Ricochet and Retribution storyline to continue over the next few weeks on Raw. This week on Raw, we saw Mace defeat Ricochet in singles action. The match came after Ricochet and Dana Brooke defeated Reckoning and Slapjack the week before in mixed tag team action, and Ricochet defeated Slapjack in the week before that. After this week's match, Retribution held Ricochet in the ring while Mustafa Ali yelled at him, saying this won't end until Ali says it will end, and it won't be until Ricochet joins Retribution. Now, in an update, PW Insider has reported that WWE does have plans for Retribution to continue pushing Ricochet to join the group, and the storyline will continue to play out in the coming weeks. I think realistically, at this point, who cares? I mean, there's not much opinion to put on it. Who really cares? You know, Monday Night Raw's got far worse issues at the moment with the ratings. I don't know if, Ricochet and Retribution, is that going to drive ratings? It's just, it's a nothing storyline. It's a nothing storyline. Ricochet, is the way he's been booked since, Brock Lesnar earlier this year. He's never recovered. And the Retribution angle, what more needs to be said? I mean, it had promise for just that big a period. But, I mean, talk about WWE mishandling anything when it comes to that. I mean, it's a nothing storyline. It's a nothing storyline. I haven't got a lot to say about it, to be honest. Let's talk about the backstage update on Lana's status for the next few weeks. Of course, Lana is now expected to be off WWE TV for several weeks. As we noted yesterday, Monday's edition of Raw saw WWE do an injury angle with Lana and her after a win over WWE Women's Tag Team Champion Nia Jax. WWE noted that she suffered devastating injuries to her elbow and leg in the attack by Jax and Shayna Baszler afterwards. Lana was then pulled from WWE TLC on Sunday, and Raw Women's Champion Asuka will now have to find a new partner to challenge Nia Jax and Shayna Baszler for the tag team titles. Now, regarding Lana's status, PW Insider is reporting that word coming out of Raw is that she's expected to be off Raw for as long as 3 or 4 weeks. Now, who is going to team up with Asuka on Sunday? I said previously that I think it's going to be Charlotte Flair. She's going to return. We know she's returning soon, and the plans are, quote, locked for her to return. We don't know what those plans are. I would assume it's for Charlotte Flair to return on Sunday as we head into Royal Rumble season and WrestleMania season next year. As far as Lana being out for 3 to 4 weeks, I think it's just storyline at this point, but nevertheless, it's just odd. They've been pushing her hard, getting her over as a sympathetic babyface. I guess having her be out for an injury for 3 or 4 weeks is just another way for fans to buy into her as a sympathetic babyface, I guess. And Charlotte, if it is Charlotte Flair on Sunday, it will be interesting. It'll be very interesting because obviously Charlotte does have the history of Nia Jax. That's why she's on the shelf. She also has the history of Asuka. So it'll be interesting to see if she comes back as a babyface or a heel. Personally, I hope it's a heel because she's better, quite frankly, as a heel. Raw needs her. Raw needs her badly. Raw needs Charlotte Flair. The Raw Women's Division is so bare and so boring, quite frankly, right now. And that's not a reflection on the talent because the talent's there for whatever reason. Again, it was Monday Night Raw booking problems. I mean, what's new? Preaching to the choir here. It's just not good. It's just not good. And finally, let's have a little bit of New Japan news. We don't cover New Japan all the time here. It's difficult to keep up with all of the promotions in North America, let alone in Japan. But we have some backstage news on AEW's Chris Jericho, his status with New Japan Pro Wrestling. Now, Chris Jericho's most recent appearance in New Japan was back in January at Wrestle Kingdom 14, where he defeated Hiroshi Tanahashi. After the pandemic hit, though, travelling to overseas became restricted and very difficult, but according to the latest edition of Wrestling Observer Radio, this wasn't the only reason that the former AEW World Champion hasn't returned to New Japan since. Former New Japan President and CEO Harold Meiji reportedly held off on getting Jericho back due to the cost of bringing in Chris Jericho for New Japan. He left the company last month, the former president, and now is replaced by Takahami Obari. Jericho currently doesn't have a contract with New Japan, but there now is renewed interest within the company to bring back Jericho for a match. Obviously, as I mentioned earlier, the pandemic hasn't gone away or anything like that. Travel is easier going to Japan, but there is a quarantine period back and forth still. So Jericho headlining to New Japan right now, or heading to New Japan right now, is unlikely, but it is something that is still being planned possibly for down the road. Dave Meltzer has speculated that at New Japan Dominion, typically New Japan's second biggest show of the year in June or July, this could be a time that we see Jericho return to the company. I love Chris Jericho's appearances in New Japan. I've loved the matches that he's had, whether it's against Kenny Omega, Tanahashi, Naito, Evil. I think all of them have been great, and I love the Painmaker gimmick. And I think Jericho, most importantly in all of this, likes being in New Japan too. He gets paid very well, and it allows him to open up that creative envelope, as it were, and do some big shows in Japan. And he's got history there. He likes doing it. So I hope to see him back there soon. But as I mentioned previously, it'll probably be in the summer if it does happen. But of course, as always, this is just one man's opinion. What are your thoughts on the news stories that we have presented to you today? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I'll do my best to respond and reply to all of your comments. Really enjoy interacting with you guys, talking about WWE, AEW, Impact Wrestling. Ton of Impact stuff to come today, so be sure to check that out. New Japan, NXT, all pro wrestling stuff. Really enjoy interacting with you guys. So get involved in the community in the comment section below and share your opinion. All opinions are welcome. If you have enjoyed this video, please do smash a like on the like button. Really does help us out here on YouTube. Go up the rankings and get into people's recommendation feeds if they haven't seen our videos previously. But most importantly, if you haven't already, please do subscribe to Wrestle News 365. You can do that by clicking the bottom right hand corner of the screen right now. Or if you wait a few seconds, there'll be a subscribe button at the end of this video along with another video for you to watch. Thank you very much for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today, and I'll speak to you again very, very soon. Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.